Hi everyone. Okay, the objectives for this video are to review past Regents questions related to polyatomic ions. So let's first remind ourselves what a polyatomic ion is. A polyatomic ion is a group of atoms covalently bonded which together have a charge. Now, a group of atoms, we get that meaning from the prefix poly, and atomic atoms. And together they behave like an ion. Now these can behave like a cation if they are positively charged, or act as an ion if negatively charged. Question 1. Which polyatomic ion contains the greatest number of oxygen atoms? We have 4 to choose from. And where do we gather more information on these 4? Well, we get it from the reference tables, Table E to be specific, where they are listed. Now, let's first take a look at acetate. And acetate is right here. And how many oxygens are present? When I inspect this carefully, I do see that there are 2 oxygens. Carbonate. Carbonate is right here. Here I see that there are 3 oxygens. Hydroxide. Where are you, hydroxide? Hydroxide is right here. Looking at its formula, there is only 1. And peroxide, which is just above it, and there are 2. So which one of these 4 choices has the most number of oxygen atoms? It is choice number 2. Question number 2. Which polyatomic ion has a charge of 3-? Again, we will have to inspect the reference table E and chromate ion. Chromate ion is, where are you? Chloride. Chromate is right there, and it's a 2-, so it cannot be choice 1. Oxalate. Where is oxalate? There it is. It too is a 2-. Phosphate. Phosphate right there, 3-. Looks good, but let's inspect the last for completeness. Thiocyanate is just a -1. We are looking at choice number 3. Question 3. Which electron dot diagram best represents a compound that contains both ionic and covalent bonds? Now, in order to do this one, I see, well, for number 1, I see 2 hydrogens and a sulfur. I see a calcium, 4 oxygens and a sulfur, a potassium and a bromine, 2 bromine. So I'm actually going to write out the formulas and put them next to it. And I'm going to also recall that I need to be suspicious of a polyatomic ion when I see more than 1 different element together in a formula. So now when I inspect the formulas that I wrote, I see hydrogens, right here, I see hydrogen and sulfur, that has only 2. I see down here for choice 3, potassium and bromine, that has only 2. This one only has 1 choice. In fact, this is not a compound at all. It is a diatomic element, and diatomic elements need to be held together covalently. And now let's go up to number 2, and I see calcium, sulfur, and oxygen. Right there I am very suspicious. Now let's inspect our table and see if in fact we have that. And I do know that we do. Let me show it to you. SO4, where are you? There it is. There is a polyatomic ion there. So let me show you exactly where these bonds are. So to begin with, sulfurs and oxygen. Sulfur is a non-metal. Oxygen is a non-metal. So within this portion of the compound, we have covalent bonds. But together, they have a charge. They have a -2 charge, while the calcium has a +2 charge. So where I'm about to draw in red, there is an ionic bond between the calcium and the sulfate. So it is choice number 2. Number 4, which compound contains both ionic and covalent bonds? Now remember from a moment ago, the last question, said if you see three or more elements together, different elements together in a formula, you must be suspicious. So if I were to take a look at number one has hydrogens and bromines. It cannot be that. Number 2, carbons and bromines. It's only 2 choices. Number 3, sodium and bromine. Again, no. And lastly, we have sodium, oxygen, and hydrogen. It's looking good, but let's inspect. Do we have a polyatomic ion present? And OH is right here, hydroxide. Now, in the event that you did not want to go through all of that, you could have also inspected all of these to see if there are 2 nonmetals together, and oxygen and hydrogen is nonmetal to nonmetal. Okay, and what would hold the sodium to that? Well, sodium is a metal. What would hold sodium to the nonmetal and nonmetal combination? It would be an ionic bond. So right in here we have a covalent bond, and between these we have an ionic bond. It is choice 4. So 5 is a similar question. Which compound contains both ionic and covalent bonds? Let's shoot to the ones that cannot be the case. Choice 2 has just 2 different elements. Choice 3 has just 2 different elements. So we're stuck between choice 1, which is CaCO3, and CH2O. Each one of these contains 3 different elements. But my attention is drawn to this one. Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. They are all nonmetals. So with them being all nonmetals, there's no choice but only covalent bonds holding them together. So it cannot be this one. So let's confirm our answer and see if we do have a polyatomic ion present. And CO3, where is it? CO3 is right here. So there is a covalent bond holding those 2 together, and an ionic bond holding the calcium to the carbonate. The answer is choice 1. Now question number 6, using similar logic, which compound has both ionic and covalent bonding? I'm going to focus on the elements present, and for choice number 1, I see calcium, I see carbon, I see oxygen. There are 3 different elements. Choice 2, I see carbon, hydrogen, and chlorine. Don't worry about the subscripts. I'm just looking at the type of elements. For 3, I have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. Then it mentions mentions hydrogen again, so I'm not even going to put it on the list. And 4 mentions carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Now I'm going to focus on the quality of these different elements. On these right here, I see carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, all nonmetals. Nonmetals will bond together covalently. I see no way, no how for them to bond ionically. So it is not that. Carbon, hydrogen, and chlorine, again, all nonmetals. It cannot be. So our choice is number 1. We have calcium, carbon, and oxygen. But let's confirm. Do we have a polyatomic ion? And yes, we do. CO3. This is calcium carbonate. So there is, in fact, let me show you where these bonds are. Drawing in black now. There is an covalent bond between the carbon and the oxygens. And there is an ionic bond between the calcium and the carbonate. So it is choice number 3. I don't know if you saw the circle, but it's in yellow there. I'm sorry, it's choice number 1 in yellow. Thank you for listening.